Very much, and cameras on if you can, that'd be super. So welcome to this meeting of the Rail North Committee. My name is Susan Hinchcliffe. I'm Vice Chair of Rail North, and I'm standing in today for Mayor Andy Burnham, who unfortunately can't join us this morning. But we have a full agenda in front of us. Shall we just do some introductions, perhaps just so people know who's here, and then we can do apologies. Can I just see who we got now? Let me have a look. I'll just call you out. Who have we got here? We've got Alex Hines.
I think, Councillor, in terms of apologies, I think we just look to Helen if she can just list apologies for us, and then we've got our guests.
I'm just really wanting to do the introductions to the committee members so people can see who's on the committee, but it's just difficult to tell from this.
So the introduction for the visitors we've got.
The committee members, really, because
committee
obviously
members.
people are joining online. People need to know who the committee members are. I'm trying to be helpful. That's what I'm normally doing in a meeting.
That's absolutely fine, Councillor. Helen, have we got our list of attendees and apologies, please?
Yes, I've got the apologies here. So I've had apologies from Mayor Luke Campbell, Councillor David Tucker, Councillor Phil Riley and Councillor Denise Rollo. They're the apologies for the meeting today.
Do we have attendees list of the councillors and leaders and mayors who are here?
Let me have a look. So I have Councillor John Murray, Councillor Peter Kilbane, Councillor Anne McCormack, Councillor Martin Gannon, Councillor Steve Harker. Just looking. Mayor Rotherham, Councillor Anthony McKeown. I think this is your first meeting. Councillor Peter Mason. Oliver Coppard. And yourself. I think that's all the councillors. Is there anyone on that I haven't mentioned?
I'm not seeing anybody indicating, so thank you very much, everybody, for humouring me with that exercise. Declarations of interest. Anybody got any declarations of interest to make? No? In that case, we move on to minutes of the previous meeting. On the 25th of November, those have been circulated. Are there any issues or matters arising from that paper? No? Okay, well, in that case, can I agree that we take that as a correct record of that meeting? Anybody want to dissent from that? Please let me know now. No, in that case, that's good. Thank you very much. So now going on to the first substantive item on the agenda, which is the Rail North Partnership operational update. I think do I start with Gary for this, or we go to Alex Hines first?
We're going to go to Alex, if that's okay, Councillor. Thank you.
So Alex Hines is the brand new CEO of DFT, or the DFT operator. So you're going to say a few introductory words about your new role. Alex, welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Right. So thank you very much. My name's Alex Hines, the Chief Executive of DFTO. I'm 6 weeks into my new role, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joining you this morning to listen and learn about how collectively we can create a better rail network for the north of England. I am a Mancunian. I studied in Leeds and I served as the Managing Director of Northern Rail between 2013 and 2017. I don't live in the north of England anymore, but I do know a wee bit about it. And I'm as passionate as you are working together to develop a rail network that we can all be proud of. DFTO, who are we? Well, we're quite a curious organisation. Obviously, this government have a policy of operating railways within public ownership. We are the company which owns the operators that are in public ownership. There are 8 out of the 14 in England now are now in public ownership. We employ around 30,000 people across our 8 operational businesses, delivering services to customers each day. And we're returning the train operating companies from private to public ownership at a rate of about 1 every 3 months. And by the end of next year, all the train operating companies in England, those that are managed by the DfT at least, will be in public ownership. And DfT have been asked by the government to improve performance on the railway, obviously, but also to work with our colleagues in Network Rail to drive rail reform. Obviously, in the north of England, we have an enormous amount of work going on already. We're working hard across Network Rail, Northern and TransPennine to improve the daily service that we see to customers. Both Northern and TransPennine are in the market for new trains and rolling stock investment, which is great to see. Obviously, we have the TransPennine route upgrade, where operators and Network Rail are working brilliantly together whilst we deliver a once-in-a-generation £12 billion upgrade to primarily the TransPennine route, but not exclusively. And then, of course, we've seen recent announcements by the government on Northern Powerhouse Rail. So I think the north of England is one of the most exciting places to be, and I really look forward to working with you on this mission, and happy to take any questions on any of that, or indeed anything that I haven't mentioned. This is my listening and learning period, so please do share your observations and questions with me. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. Have we got any questions of Alex there? I must have remembered you from your previous role there, Alex. I think I was around at that time, so you're probably familiar with a lot of the people you're working with in the north of England, even if you don't live here anymore. We do have some about accessibility later on, don't we? I think that we don't have to cover now. We've got a next paper on that. Okay, well, Alex, nobody's asking you any questions at the moment, so that is great. We'll then move on to Tricia Williams then, I think, to provide a brief update.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll give an update on Northern Trains. So performance continues to be stable, which we're really pleased about. And cancellations have reduced by 2/3 compared to this time last year. And improvements have also been in punctuality, with 5 of the last 6 reporting periods better than the same time last year. And we know that a 7-day railway is critical and a priority for customers, colleagues and local economies. So reducing Sunday services in the northwest and across into some parts of the east isn't what we wanted for customers, but it has allowed us to give customers more certainty, and we haven't lost sight of the impact. So we have been making good progress with the RMT union, hard work on all sides, and sorting Sundays for the future. Making Sundays part of the working week is a priority, and also focused on delivering work to drive long-term sustained improved performance. I do want to acknowledge some challenges we've got with our current fleet availability and the impact that is having for customers on some routes. I want to assure the committee that we have a team working around the clock with our supplier to make sure that we do have as many trains available as possible. The December timetable change went well. It allowed us to introduce the Yorkshire Flyer, which is a new fast service between Leeds and Sheffield, and it provides around 30,000 extra seats on the route every week. And we've also been able to improve capacity on the Durham coast by making our Middlesbrough to Newcastle semi-fast service hourly, and some other minor changes to help reliability for customers. And those services build on a growing demand that we're seeing, and with the improved performance and stable performance, that is building customer confidence. And we can therefore focus capacity where market demand is greatest. So on that basis of stable performance, we are looking to increase our journeys by 30 million by 2030. That's our growth programme. We talked to many of your officers about that, and that will come about through simpler fares, improved customer experience, stronger alignment of capacity and demand, but much more, all built on a foundation of strong and stable performance. And we saw that strong performance, really giving us a strong finish to 2025. We had our highest December since COVID for both customer journeys and customer satisfaction, with underlying demand growing by 10% in P10. This increase in customer confidence on the back of stable performance really does enable our marketing and revenue management team to make sure that customers can travel with confidence. January has been more challenging, I would say. That's trading across the whole of UK Rail. We're seeing a bit of a weaker than expected external backdrop, which is reducing footfall in key areas. So, for example, we saw retail footfall down by 6% year on year in January. Weather plays a part in this. It is dampening demand this year, but we've also got a large programme of planned engineering works. We've had Church Fenton over in the east. We've got work ongoing now in Ardwick, and sometimes that does constrain our capacity and opportunity to drive growth. But that said, there are green shoots as we move into spring. Northumberland line continues to perform well, and we have Northumberland Park Station opening this Sunday. And then the final station on the Northumberland line route, which is Bedlington, is due to open on the 29th of March. And we know the opportunity that the Northumberland line is creating for those living and working along the route. And it's great to see the demand there. So we're continuing to focus on driving growth on the back of that strong and stable performance, encouraging customers to move from car to train, and things like our partnership with Super League provides an opportunity really to continue to connect people and communities across the north. And all of this supports the industry subsidy challenge. And we believe it is growth that will really enable that subsidy to come down. And then that provides a catalyst for economic growth across the north. So I will pause for questions there.
Thank you, Tricia. I mean, obviously, it goes without saying that we all want to see the Sunday services restored as quickly as possible. This is something this committee has discussed on several occasions. Obviously, there's a further conversation to happen with that. But you talked there about increased improvement in response in performance, which is encouraging to see. Nevertheless, we've also got Chris Jackson on the line here, who is Managing Director. I think he's our Chief Executive these days of TPT, Chris. So any members got any questions? Chris is going to be around for the next item as well on network resilience, I believe, Chris. But in the meantime, is there any sort of general performance questions you want to ask of Tricia from Northern or Chris Jackson from TPT? Mayor Rotherham.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. It's good to hear, isn't it, that things on paper are improving, but for those people who try to get to the new Everton Stadium at Bramley Moor called Hill Dickinson Stadium, they won't have identified that services are improving. In fact, the anecdotal stuff that we're getting is that it's at best stood still for the last 6 or 7 months. For many people, it's got much worse. And whilst we're doing everything with Merseyrail to get as many people to and from that stadium safely, and we're talking about 16,000 people who are going by train, about 7,500 going on the buses. Those who are going to Lime Street face nothing but delay. And the other thing about performance and what the PPM masks is that whilst the train may well be on time, if it's short formed, there's no way that passengers getting on, say, for instance, at Newton Le Willows can possibly either get on or off at times. And so it's a really uncomfortable journey for many people. And we've heard before, haven't we? Last time we were on this, we were told that there was hope that there was going to be some resolution with the union on Sunday working. And we're still waiting for that. So we just need at least some hope that things are going to change, and it just isn't forthcoming at the moment.
Thank you, Mayor Rotherham. So Tricia, do you want us come in on that in terms of particularly that service around Everton?
Yeah, obviously that's the the issues on a Sunday will have a knock-on effect into Lime Street. I'm well aware of that. So the reduced service on a Sunday is not what we want to see. As an Evertonian, Mayor Rotherham, I'm particularly interested in all of the services around Hill Dickinson, but the Sunday issue is absolutely a top priority. So as I mentioned, the talks are ongoing with the RMT union. You'll appreciate those talks are sensitive, and I wouldn't want to go into any detail in a public forum, but that is absolutely the aim, to have a better, improved performance and increased services actually on a Sunday, so that we bring Sundays inside of the working week.
And Chair, if I may, it's Chris Jackson here. Thank you, Mayor Rotherham. So it's not all on Tricia, this, being quite transparent. You know, certainly at Transpennine Express, we have let customers down, match goers on several weekends, and indeed I've been in correspondence with Mayor Burnham on that very issue. There's a couple of headwinds that we're facing into. We've got some very restrictive terms and conditions as well, but some of them have been own goals, which I've been quite transparent about when I've spoken to Andy, particularly in Greater Manchester Fora. One of the headwinds that we have, of course, is the unprecedented amount of engineering work that's going on the patch. And whilst it is very, very exciting that billions is going into investment across the north, occasionally that does mean that we reduce the frequency of train services between Liverpool and Manchester. That's a big focus of ours as well, whilst also protecting the calls at Lee Green and Newton Willows for services into Liverpool Lime Street. So acutely aware of it. I know it's not always been perfect, but it's something that I intend to keep you, Mayor Rotherham, and Andy fully updated on in the coming weeks.
So I think some sort of timelines and improvement trajectory would be helpful there for Mayor Rotherham, I think is what he's saying there. So just moving to Councillor Kilbane.
Oh yeah, thank you, Chair. And just to welcome the progress. It's great to see as a regular user of Northern Trains. I can see it in practice. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. We've got a long way to go to get our train service in the north to where it needs to be. A long way to go, but it's so much easier to progress when those train operators are under public control and we can all work together towards that end. So there are some advances. Just on one question really, Tricia. It's the trains terminating at Filey on the Hull Scarborough and starting at Filey. Any ideas as to when we're going to get that full service resumed all the way through to Scarborough?
No, I haven't got an update on that, Councillor Kilbane, I'm afraid.
If you can get back to us outside the meeting, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's take that as an action. Councillor Gannon.
Just a very quick point to echo Tricia's comments on the success on the Northumberland line, and congratulations. So I think about 1 million customers have used that line already. Got 2 further stations opening within the next month. I think one is Sunday and one at the back end of March. I know there is an issue which I think is being progressed at the present time that we're working together on in terms of additional trains for that line. I think we've already demonstrated the huge potential. I think there's work ongoing there. I'm getting optimistic reports back. Is there anything, Trish, you can add to that?
No, we are working with the team at Northumberland County Council. It's a challenge actually, where we've got a limited number of diesel units, and where everybody wants to strengthen different services across the north. We do strengthen the Northumberland line when we can, particularly when we've got football matches. It's a popular route now for some of the fans up in the northeast. But there is no easy answer. So we are working with the team to look at A, are there any units available anywhere else, and B, how they are funded, because there is a budget constraint really in terms of us being able to afford to put anything more on that line.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Murray.
Just following up the football theme, if I may. Away fans would much rather not have to drive all the way to Barrow. but there's still a significant speed restriction on the coastal line between Lancaster and Barrow. It takes absolutely ages. And Carlisle, very well supported. They do like to go to their away matches. And on Saturdays, the short form trains on the Carlisle to Leeds, if we can put it that way around for a change, line is an issue. Thanks.
Do you want me to respond back to the
Yes,
issue of
please.
short forming? Yeah, I do acknowledge there are some issues with short forming at the moment, and I apologise for that. We've had an not anticipated issue with wheel sets on some of our new fleet. That has led to us working very, very closely with the supplier, and I'm confident we'll come through that issue by the end of March. So that has resulted in us needing to shortfall, probably links back to the point made by Mayor Rotherham actually on some of the short forming on some of the services, for example, running through places like Newton Willows. So it is something we're very aware of. We are managing it. The engineering team are very focused on this, and I anticipate that by the end of March, we will be in a much better position with regard to availability of units.
Thank you very much. In this paper, there's also an update on accessibility there, isn't there, as well? Something that this committee has championed a lot, actually, over the years. Gary or Katie, did you want to say anything on that? Obviously, we've got funding through for 5 stations in the north, but I think we already knew that, didn't we? But obviously, we refused devolution on accessibility funding. So is there anything further we need to do on that item?
Gary, did you want to come on this paper as lead?
In respect of the to date, I think all we've had back from the department is an anticipation that funding in respect of accessibility in the Access for All sphere would remain centralised. I confess, Kate, I can't recall offhand if there was an intention to write further to the department in respect of that, or if the work was around collaborative working with Network Rail and the operators to identify the areas that would need more immediate investment, and using the kind of collation of the various sets of accessibility regulations that there are in order to identify a set of priorities and an enhancement order for the north. I think we can certainly do that work in isolation, but in the absence of funding, it will be much more, I think, preparation than it would be delivery. Councillors, I think it remains, I think, Katie, to decide whether there's a further piece of action in respect of taking that up further with the department or not.
So when we last discussed it as a committee, the view was still that the view was the news was very disappointing, and I think where the committee resolved was that actually the way forward on this has got to be what can be secured between MSA and GBR and new partnerships, because actually the current rate of progress is still far from what's needed. What Gary and his team have tried to do in the paper is demonstrate what else we're trying to do to keep accessibility at the top of the agenda for the north of England. But I think the fact remains that the response from the department was effectively that the money is committed, and actually there isn't therefore any funding to devolve at this point in time. I think it was fair to say that the TFM board, as well as this committee, were very keen to explore the right to request under the new devolution powers. We have pressed that argument as well, but as things stand at the moment, we aren't seeing any access for all funding devolved at this point. And I think the challenge for us is how we can keep things progressing and on track that are already in the delivery plan, so that those happen as quickly as possible. And that's where Gary and his team are working closely with colleagues across the north of England. So I think at this point, Chair, it was about noting the update of where we've got to. And of course, if the committee wants us to take any further action at this time, we can. I can't really say any more than I think just continue to express the committee sentiments that this is just disappointing at the rate of progress.
Thank you for that update, Katie. And I think, we need to try and be creative, don't we, as to where we find monies to do some of this work on the Transpond upgrade, for example. There's quite a lot of accessibility work going on. So any works that are commissioned need to include this. Councillor McEwen?
Thanks, Chair. I think sort of echo the sort of disappointment in terms of sort of being able to get some of this funding devolved. There are a couple of schemes sort of that are falling. Hopefully now that EMCA is now the proper transport authority for our patch, I'm hopeful that sort of one of the stations, Chinley, which sort of just on the edge of sort of the Greater Manchester area, but also sort of not that far short of being on the edge of Mayor Coppard's patch as well, is one of those places that sort of has a little fell between the cracks in terms of sort of not having a mayoral authority for it. We have now got one in place, but I think there is that just need to watch those places that are on the edge of the various mayoral authorities to make sure that we can sort of slot in and gain any benefits, in particular in terms of sort of getting some of that accessibility funding. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McKeown. Good point. Mayor Coppard.
Thank you. Look, I do sometimes feel a little bit like I'm shouting into the void on this stuff, as I think we all do. But I just again make the point that South Yorkshire's community who need these improvements are being let down every day. You know, the idea that we're going to have 5 stations across the north improved, while we have 27 stations alone in South Yorkshire, and everybody will feel this acutely themselves in their own places. But you know, I speak on behalf of South Yorkshire, and people who need those improvements in order just to live their lives like everybody else should be able to expect to. I find it frankly astonishing, and we are letting people down who need our help, and it can't carry on like this. The rate of improvement is far too slow for people who need those improvements yesterday. So just kind of make that point again. I do wonder if we need to write to the government again and make this point and just keep on banging the drum, because I think that's the least that people should expect. My question is simply just, and one for the group rather than any individual, I suppose, is just, do we worry that we are, and I choose my words sort of carefully because I don't want to imply that I'm not absolutely ambitious for the standards we should reach, but I do wonder if we might be gold plating some of this in the first and early stages, and therefore putting off what could be relatively straightforward improvements today in exchange for what feel like the best possible solution. I say tomorrow, but it doesn't feel like tomorrow. It feels like, you know, far too far away in terms of the timetable that we would therefore have as a result of putting in place those ambitions. I wonder if there are things that we could do more quickly that across more stations that might actually just help people to live more straightforward lives and access some of these stations more swiftly. It's a question for the group if others feel similarly or have more direct expertise or information than I do.
Yes, Mayor Coppard, I was going to say the same actually, that West Yorkshire Transport Committee last time, Councillor Steele mentioned about Harrington Humps, which apparently provides step-free access on a temporary basis just from the platform to taking out the step to the train. So are there sort of measures we can take station by station, which are not massive infrastructure, which will just help a little bit and enable people to live their lives a little bit easier? So I think that's what we're asking in this. I've got Katie first.
Thank you, Mayor Coppard. Councillor Hinchcliffe, just to come back on that. So the committee may recall that your subgroup worked on what were priority interventions to lift accessibility when it worked across it over the last 18 months. So we have got that information and very happy to come back on that more specifically outside the meeting. What I would say is that looked at a range of what I as a consumer would say seem to be relatively straightforward interventions, such as tactile paving, such as improved lighting, such as thinking about some things around CCTV and information points as well as perhaps some of the more costly interventions, such as the full step-free access, which has been the ambition. But we've got all that data behind the scenes, Mayor Coppard. So let us take that away and come back to you and come back to the committee members, because I think that prioritisation did happen, and it's definitely informed the advice that we've put back into the Secretary of State about how this could be moved forward, but equally adding weight to the argument about why actually if the funding is devolved, those decisions and delivery can more readily take place within mayoral combined authorities, where you're perhaps going to have a much clearer idea of what those priorities would be. So we'll come back on that, because I think it's timely just to look at that again and just make sure that we are focusing on the most easily deliverable interventions as far as possible to see if we can bring pace to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. And I think a letter going on Mayor Coppard's suggestion is a good idea. So let's follow that up. I've got Chris Jackson, I think, is it? Or Alex? Chris Jackson, possibly.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just building on what Katie said, we do have across Northern and Transpennine a programme, what we call minor works to improve accessibility, linked to what Mayor Coppard has said. So we, of course, can collate that information, send it through to Katie and make sure that you get that. And by that minor works, I mean things like handrails, I mean things like drop curbs, things that make people's lives easier in the short term. Of course, pending wider decisions on what happens with the bigger schemes. So things are happening, things have happened, and we'll summarise those for you.
Thank you. And I think it's up to all of us on this committee to make sure when we're talking about rail improvements, infrastructure improvements across our patch, to ask the question, you know, how has accessibility been factored into this new project? We've all got rail plans for our own areas and just need to be mindful that this question is always at the front of mind. So thank you for that. So the elements on there are for noting. So we're now going to move, therefore, to item number 5, which is network resilience. Are we on track, Katie, there?
We are, Chair, and we do have a couple of guests with us for this item as well.
That's lovely, thank you. So I can see Ellie Burrows has joined us. Welcome, Ellie, Managing Director of Eastern Region here of Network Rail. And then we've got Julien de Hornoy. I don't know if I pronounced that right. I do have a degree in French. I'm trying my best there. Deputy Regional Director, North West and Central, to speak on resilience. And obviously we've had a few incidents this week which have reminded us resilience should always be front of mind. So Ellie, over to you.
So thank you. I'm going to run through a presentation and Julian and I will both be here for any questions that anybody has. And your pronunciation, probably Julian would say, is much better than mine would be. So well done on that one. So let me start by acknowledging that we are, of course, operating in a financially constrained environment, as we all are, and have to make sure that we spend every penny really carefully in the way that we manage and maintain our network. But we are still investing heavily in resilience and reliability to support our passengers, our partners, and in the growth that we all want. And Tricia obviously mentioned earlier in her slot. Today, I'm going to cover 3 linked areas as per the papers that were shared with you. So climate change, maintenance and renewals, and congested infrastructure. Before I do that, I did want to also just quickly touch on the December timetable. I know that Tricia mentioned it, but it was something that I talked about last time I was with you. I wanted to say that early performance has been strong. We should note that not all services are yet launched, and we have had only a few weeks of uninterrupted operation because of obviously Christmas and then the work around the Transpennine route upgrade and engineering work. So it's really encouraging so far in terms of the performance delivery and the challenges that I received last time, but it's too soon for us to draw final conclusions, and we're going to continue to monitor, to iterate, and we really appreciate the feedback that we have had from those that have provided it as well. So thank you. With regards to climate change, then specifically in the papers around that, we know that the North is already seeing more intense weather. The last few weeks, as you say, are a really good example of that. We're seeing heavier rain, stronger winds and temperature extremes, so live risks now, not future ones. And the approach that we're taking from an industry perspective is really, really simple. So when opportunities arise to build new infrastructure, we build it in a way that can withstand the weather challenges that we see. We look to monitor our infrastructure and intervene really early, where we're able to, when things do go wrong, we look to recover faster. And hopefully you've seen that on some of the more recent incidents that we've had. And we want to be transparent with passengers and our stakeholders and our partners around the impact that we see and how we mitigate that and the timescales that we'll see infrastructure out of use if we're in that situation, or the risks that we're dealing with. We've also developed weather resilience and climate change adaptation plans across the industry, and of course TfN has also done some valuable work in that area that we are using as well. We're using smarter monitoring, so things like, as you'd expect us to be using drones, slope sensors, real-time cameras to spot problems earlier, to get in earlier, to prevent issues arising before we see disruptions to the train service. And across the funding period, Network Rail is investing around £2.8 billion into weather resilience. We're also delivering targeted flood schemes with the Environment Agency at places like Garford, Rotherham, Morley Tunnel, and there's an £8 million scheme as well at Hessel Foreshore. So we've even put some of our signalling equipment on stilts. So the West Coast Main Line at Carlisle, we've put some of that equipment on stilts so that when the River Caldry floods and the water recedes, the equipment has been protected and we can reopen the line much quicker. So we're thinking about lots of different areas on how we build resilience into what we do. And we're learning from every incident and using our data to reduce repeat risk and reduce risk of repeat flooding sites, all of those kind of things. With regards to maintenance and renewals, we've got well-maintained infrastructure is more resilient infrastructure fundamentally, and resilience and recovery are baked into how we run our railway every day. Our plans are built around managing what is an ageing network, and we have to do so in a cost-effective way. So we need to make decisions around what we replace, but also what we refurbish and how we increase maintenance on some of our assets to deliver the best outcomes. And to bring that to life a little bit, we know that in places like Sheffield, with regards to our signalling equipment and on the West Coast Main Line between Warrington and Carlisle, some of that equipment dates from the 1970s. So we have to really prioritise our funding and make sure we get the right solution for the right locations. And across Eastern and Northwest and Central region, we've introduced new prioritisation processes that build on what we've done previously, but really better aligns how we deliver our objectives of the best possible outcome for our passengers. We've worked really hard to modernise the way that we do our maintenance, but also prioritise our work banks and improve how we respond when things do go wrong. Highlighting those critical assets that if they go, we lose a huge amount of kind of our network or services come to a stop fundamentally. So how we work with that better and putting plans in place to really respond better, replace, renew, or better maintain those so that they don't fail in the first place. And we've worked really hard with the capability in our teams as well. So how we keep roles filled and not have gaps in our roles, but also how we train our people and focus on their capability. Also looking forward as well, making sure that we understand the skills that we're going to need as we bring the next generation of assets in, such as digital signalling. It's great to see lots of our new apprentices getting really, really involved in that. And digital signalling will be cheaper to maintain as well for us in the long term. So it provides new career paths, but also really helps us think about the sustainability of the industry as we progress on that basis as well. And finally, we've also begun work on our next control funding period. So we work in 5-year funding periods. The next one starts in 3 years. We're already engaging early with your officers and really want to work closely with them as we progress towards the next control period to understand your focus and how we focus the renewals part. Our funding periods are on renewals, but how we really focus that and really shift the dial for passengers and growth that we all want. So to summarise, when it comes to maintenance and renewals, we know that there's more to do. We know we want it to be more reliable, but we really work to prioritise on risk to operation in terms of performance and passenger benefit, and we really want to align that with local priorities as we progress towards GBR. And finally, there was a section in there around congested infrastructure. I'm sure you've seen from the papers, but that's where growth ambitions meet hard capacity limits fundamentally. When we designate a route as congested, it means that the demand for operation on that route outstrips what the network can reliably handle before train performance is really put at risk. So examples of this are places like the Castlefield Corridor in Manchester, a critical pinch point for us. We know that we need to release more capacity on the network in that area, and we're delivering the Manchester Network Transformation Programme, looking at things like timetable stabilisation, the Wigan Bolton electrification, Salford Crescent platform and turn-back sidings, and upgrades at Manchester Oxford Road and Manchester Airport, and the plans to really look at longer and new platforms at Piccadilly, which in the longer term could unlock regional train performance benefits. And then on the Northallerton section of the East Coast Main Line, we know for the northeast there's a real capacity constraint there on the East Coast Main Line, and those problems persist, and we're really exploring what the potential options for that could be, and working I'm really pleased to see that the Secretary of State has been clear that the Leamside line is being considered as part of the wider Northern Powerhouse Rail programme. and the future network planning, recognising its potential to support both passenger and freight connectivity, which could really support us in unlocking that. So in the meantime, we're working with our operators and regional partners on the East Coast to look at how we can refine the timetable, improve pathing, and make better use of the existing infrastructure whilst continuing to champion the growth and connectivity that we need there. So we're taking these constraints seriously and acting now. We must prioritise ruthlessly and deliver improvements we can afford and sustain to keep reliable for our passengers. When planning this work, our sponsorship teams are really engaging with TfN and with your local officers to map out improvements alongside your local aspirations. And we really want to work to understand how your local ambitions and plans can be delivered at the same time as some of these wider and bigger programmes of work. And we're really committed to working with this committee and local partners to ensure that we what we prioritise delivers the greatest benefits for people across the North fundamentally. So we're very happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you very much. I hardly dare say anything about the new timetable yet. So obviously we all remember 2018, but so far so good. That's all I'll say.
Thank you.
So and obviously we've got Chris Jackson is going to also talk in a few minutes. Is anybody any questions so far for Ellie and Julia? No. Chris, are you going to talk about climate change as well?
I was just going to build, actually, Chair, on what Ellie said, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's
linking
fine.
it
Do
to
that
some
then.
Brill. So loads and loads of work going on, as Ellie mentioned, to make the railway more resilient, and of course also renewing large parts of it. We've got billions of pounds worth of investment going into rail in the north, which is exciting, as Alex mentioned earlier. So as you'd expect, we as operators, we're in lockstep actually with the whole railway industry to realise that investment. Our aim is, of course, to keep passengers on trains rather than replacement buses. And to illustrate the joint working point that I wanted to get across to the group, I chair the West Coast North Modernisation Programme Board. Tricia sits on that. Andy Mellors, who I know is on the call, also sits on that. And both Tricia and myself are part of the TRU Programme Board. Now, that makes sure that the major programmes aren't just seen as engineering projects, but always have a focus on the customer and the end user. And I think that model is actually working quite well. And, on the topic of major works, we've got a proven record of delivery. We've delivered Huddersfield, we've delivered Church Fenton over Christmas, and also Clifton with the big bridge replacement. And each of those cases, we kept trains operating on diversionary routes, keeping rail replacement to the shortest journeys possible. And from a TransPennine perspective, the recovery plan that was supported by this committee, if you can remember, back in 2023, that's really helped us to operate 3 trains an hour on our diversionary routes now between the North West and West Yorkshire. And that's because of the progress that we've made on our driver training programme. It's probably just worth mentioning as well, we've got big £70 million investment on Julian's patch, who might want to come in a moment, which is, of course, the Ardwick blockade that's going on, and renewing the junction south of Manchester Piccadilly. Customer handling has had some challenges, but, I think actually as an industry, we've really risen to the early blips and are providing a much better service from today onwards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Resilience is something that this committee has been particularly focused on, really. When there are these disruptions, how do we cope with it as an industry? Because obviously there are lots of there's limited capacity to cope actually when things go wrong, isn't there, really? And I don't know if there's anything you can say about the resilience that you're putting in place across the system. I mean, Ellie, is that something you can comment on in terms of how do we make sure that if there's a disruption, we can cope and it doesn't damage the whole economy for such a long time?
Absolutely. So I suppose, there are lots of different forms that could take. If we're talking about kind of some of that the environmental impact type stuff, and I suppose we've had a few examples in the last few days in the eastern region in terms of earthworks issues where we've seen the railway closed for a period of time. After those, our focus has very much been around working with our train operator partners on how we have the best service around whatever we do, so how we keep people moving, whether that's about keeping those trains moving or the best plan that we can possibly have on how we're going to keep people moving around those things, and then getting the railway back as quickly as possible. And that is really, really key to us. So I think in the past you will have seen big stretches closed for quite a period of time when we've had earthwork failures. Actually, we've been able to get the most recent examples are kind of 24 hours, 48 at the most, being able to keep the railway open at that day and get in that evening, those type of things. So it will obviously always depend on what we see, but our plans are very much aimed at keeping people safe, getting in there before we see the failures or failing in a safe way so that we protect people, and then getting things recovered as quickly as we're able to. And as Chris has really well articulated, working together to understand those plans when things do go wrong, to do the best that we can possibly do in terms of how we deliver for our passengers and keep people moving, and learning from our mistakes as inevitably there are small bits of that go wrong, learning from those mistakes together.
Thank you, Ellie. I think I'm particularly concerned about those landslides that, keep the line closed for 6, 7, 8 months at a time, which we've had in the Baildon, on the Baildon line for a number of months. And I think there's one now, is it Leeds Sheffield is disrupted at the moment? I can't recall which.
So we have the railway back in those locations now, but we have a speed restriction on one of those sites, and we were able to bring that back quite quickly. I think as I kind of talked through my presentation, I talked about how we're trying to get really early insight into those locations and what could go wrong. So the monitoring equipment and the drone surveys and things like that we've really built into our plans going forward are about understanding early and getting in before it has an impact on the network. We can't always do that, and I should be frank, and we know that we've had a lot of rainfall in. We all feel it, don't we, over the last few weeks, and there's more forecasts, and that's a real risk for us in terms of the network. However, our plans are about how we really mobilise and have resources ready to mobilise to get in there quickly, and for those that we can, getting the network back as quickly as we possibly can, and understanding those big risk sites that you've just talked about where it could be for a longer period of time and getting in there before it fails in that way. So that's absolutely our aspiration on how we can prevent that as much as we possibly can.
It's a huge economic impact when it happens, and obviously want to avoid that at all possible. And there's still an impact now of that Baildon line being closed for all that time in the Bradford district, and I'd want to avoid that for any other place as well as our own. Is that Chris wanted to come in there?
Yeah, if I may, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to give the committee a practical example of how we've improved resilience, actually. So you obviously supported as a committee our temporary step back of the timetable to allow us to clear a backlog of driver training. We've now delivered the majority of that. That means that competency levels for train crew on diversionary routes is now much better. So rewind 3 years ago, if we had an incident like we saw in the last couple of weeks at Stanage Tunnel, which saw the tunnel closed for several days, we would not have been running a train service between Leeds and Manchester via the Calder Valley. We simply wouldn't have been operating. You rewind to what we saw following the Stanage Tunnel incident, we were operating 3 trains an hour via diversionary routes and keeping customers on the move. So that's a practical example of the action that committee have taken to support us to achieve our driver training backlog reduction, which has delivered immediate improvements for customers. I thought I'd just bring that to committee's awareness.
Indeed, and I think from a climate point of view, we just have to, obviously this is a new world, isn't it, that we all have to embrace and make sure that we can adapt and put in place fail-safes, as you do with the monitoring, to make sure you get in there early before it becomes a major problem. But it is hugely expensive for the industry, and I think you mentioned 2.8 billion. I think probably there's going to have to be more put into that, because there's hills everywhere and cuttings everywhere, isn't there? And it does mean lines are left very vulnerable. So any further questions on this item? Meg Oppard.
Thank you. Three quick points. One, my understanding is that Northern are buying trains that won't fit into Sheffield Station. And I just wonder if someone could talk about that, which is just going to cause some problems for us potentially by 2035. So in terms of resilience, I would appreciate a comment about what's going on there, because that doesn't seem particularly smart. 2, could someone from Network Rail please consider giving us a forward plan for rail closures, because we had one over Christmas which caused some chaos in Atcliffe. My understanding is it was probably planned for quite some time. We only found out about it with relatively short notice. If we could see the forward plan, that would help us to understand what's coming down the track, if you forgive the pun. And thirdly, I realise language doesn't change the impact So landslides, landslips, whatever they are, across the north are terrible for our railways and our communities, regardless of what you call them. But I wonder if we might want to consider from here on calling it climate breakdown rather than climate change, which is a transition that's been made elsewhere. And I think it just better reflects what is actually going on.
Thank you for that, Mayor Coppard. And
Thank
surely
you.
we're not buying trains that don't fit into stations. Who's going to answer that question?
I'll come in on that if that's okay. I'm not aware of that, Mayor Coppard. The only thing I can think about is that every new train we're buying is at least 3 carriages long, whereas at the moment we do have some 2 carriage units on the network. So there may well be a situation where the train is too long for the platform, but we have that in many situations now, and we've got operational procedures for the driver and the conductor to manage in that situation. So let me take that away and just understand what you've been told.
It's been flagged at our task force, Tricia. So just keen to pick that up.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially 2 ways dealing with that: either don't buy trains that aren't the right size, or my preferred option, which is the improvements to Sheffield Station, which is why it's been flagged at the task force. So just putting that on people's agenda, and something I'm probably end up coming back to, but we'll pick it up outside the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gary, did you want to come in on that point, or?
It was just to say that our team are on a circuit of engagement with representatives from members. So that's certainly something in the next few weeks we'll be in touch with, and we can take away any issues and concerns and reflect. Like Tricia, I'm not aware that it's something that has no operational solution, or isn't the sort of thing that we engage with a lot in respect of fitting trains of different lengths into stations. So I've no expectation that there isn't a ready answer in respect of operations, but we'll make sure that we reach out and take that down in full.
Thank you very much. Ellie, are you going to come in on the point that Mayor Coppard raised regarding notification of incidents and works?
Yes, so absolutely. You'll be pleased to know that Jason Hamilton had already picked that up from another conversation, so he's on the case, and we'll get that provided to you. Absolutely.
That sounds like something we need to think about ubiquitous across the network, really.
Yeah, we can think about how we provide that more widely. I think that's a really good challenge.
Thank you. And I think we take the language as read for noting and for actioning, if that's possible. Thank you very much. In terms of climate, what do you call it? Climate, Mayor Coppard, climate
breakdown.
Breakdown. Thank you, breakdown. I'll have to get used to that new language. So, any other questions on this item, which is for noting? Lovely. Thank you very much. In that case, we'll move on to infrastructure update. Charlie French.
Chair. So this report sets out...
Oh, hang on. Katie's putting her hand up like she wants to say something. Katie?
I just wanted to come on the back of that last item, Chair, if I may, because it does slightly relate to what Charlie's going to speak about now. I think if the committee recalls, we've had our state of play, the North State of Play, which has been about the investment, the big strategic investment planned across the North to improve the railway. I think what would be super with Ellie's support and Julienne's support is to make sure we overlay the renewals work into that as well, because it is part of the whole picture. And I think that then gives us an overall plan for the North of England. But I think the other thing that will hopefully help us see is when some of those closures are due. So I was just going to say, if Ellie and Julienne are happy, somewhat sort of crashing a little bit into Charlie's paper, that we'll take that away with you both, because while I don't want to create the world's greatest plan and complex plan, I think there is something here about the importance of the renewals and the work that's happening there in terms of actually just keeping performance stable and resilient, which obviously has been the theme of our conversation today. So Chair, I just hope that you didn't mind me intervening to just make that point and see if we can pick that up with the Network Rail colleagues. Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you. And that consolidates Mayor Coppard's point, I think. Sorry to interrupt you there, Charlie. So infrastructure update, item 6, off you go. Thank you.
So as Kate says, that they are quite intertwined, these reports. Yeah, the infrastructure report is designed to give you an update on the major programmes, how they interact, and where your continued engagement is vital. At the core of the report is the appendices. Appendix 1 and we're keen that you note the importance of the short-term interventions listed in there. They are desperately needed, and we are going to continue to provide regular progress updates on these so that you and members can hold the industry to account for their delivery. What I'd really stress is that these short-term schemes are not nice to have at this point. They are key enablers that allow us to unlock the benefits of the £20 billion of investment that's going into the North through TRU and other key programmes. And it also lays the foundations for Northern Powerhouse Rail and high-speed services coming up to the North as well. I wanted to pick on a clear example this morning, which is Manchester Piccadilly improvements, where interventions now are what's going to provide the capacity needed to run the enhanced and more reliable timetable in the early 2030s. If Piccadilly doesn't get additional platforms, longer platforms, then TRU's planned uplifting services can't be realised. So we'll be into a position of compromises, be it frequencies, slower services, dealing with conflicts, or perhaps a reduction in performance resilience. Hence the link to the previous report. Really simply put, if we don't deliver these short-term interventions, we can't realise the full value of the investment that's underway. So we previously discussed how the programmes across the North have been developed, different timescales, different scopes. As they move into delivery, using the state of play and some of the other tools that we've developed, the interdependencies between those schemes are becoming clearer. And again, that's highlighting the importance of the interventions set out in the appendix. There will likely be some further interventions needed. Again, back to the resilience point, we expect additional power supply, depot and stabling capacity, and platform extensions to need to feature in this short-term plan as well. They are going to be essential to support the service going forward. Now, members might recall we did previously write to the Secretary of State with several of these schemes, which were paused during the spending review, stressing their importance. We are still pressing for a response. We hope that following the NPR announcement, that can now start to come our way, and we'll circulate that as and when it's received. And then, I suppose, important to flag, over the next 2 years, we've got a key work stream that is helping us through all of this, helping navigate the change and some of these interventions that are needed. That's the North of England integration work stream, which we previously discussed, and the committee kindly gave us a steer on the key factors and priorities, things around reducing inequality, improving connectivity, driving economic growth, and safeguarding that reliability. And we're continuing to work closely with officers and the industry through that process. So what I really want to stress this morning is the importance of these short-term interventions. We really need to back them as a community and collective, really support the industry to get these over the line so that we can realise those changes throughout the 2030s. So the list in the appendices is critical. We do expect there to be some more, but it's all about laying a very strong foundation to realise the benefits for TRU and beyond into Northern Powerhouse. So happy to take any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Charlie, for that. And it's good to see that list actually there in detail. And this sort of shows the benefit of having that one guide in mind stuff as well, isn't it? I mean, for many years, Bradford was promised trains to London without anybody realising there needed to be a new platform at Bradford to be able to do that. So people were signing deals with Virgin to say, oh yes, you're going to do this, and Virgin saying, yes, we are, and then nobody ever looking to see the fact that they hadn't got a platform. So I think this starts to provide that, doesn't it, really? I suppose, how do you prioritise this? And is there sort of like a red, amber, green or prioritisation of this that we need to push on first? Because there are quite a number of things on this list. Are they all sort of screaming red at us, are these items, or is there some gradation in that?
So you'll see within the report, we've given the rationale and the strategic fit that does help. There are some which are funded. There are some which are funded subject to business case, and there are some that still need some more work to get them over the line. What the North of England integration work stream is doing is reinforcing the case for each of these, but understanding what happens if we don't get any one or a package of them. So there are service choices that will be needed alongside these interventions. And it becomes a bit of a matrix, if we're honest. Those options are what we need to do the red, amber, green on, and that work stream is active now.
Okay, so we'll in the future we'll have, because we as politicians need to know which of these is really urgent, because then we'll push, you know, to make sure we lobby for the funding that needs to happen. Because as I say, some of this doesn't sound very sexy, but is actually, as you say, fundamental. If we're going to have a successful scheme that TRU completed, there's going to be extra capacity. It needs to go somewhere. So, you know, some of these are fundamental to the overall success of those major infrastructure projects, aren't they? And we all want to see those be a success.
Absolutely. What we've tried to do in the report is highlight the ones that we know are truly critical at this time. Like I said, I'm sure working with the operators we'll find some more, particularly around the new trains interventions as well. But they're a package to get the service outcomes you need. The extra investment that unlocks it in full.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not seeing anybody indicating. Does anybody want to ask Charlie any questions on this? Councillor Harker.
Thank you. Charlie, just in terms of the section North of England integration, you mentioned at the end that we're expecting some information coming out in March 2026. Is that early analysis, as in it'll be their thoughts where they are in a process of assessing? Are they looking for consultation at that point? And thirdly, I presume from what you're saying, we are doing as much as we can to press the case for all the things that we're identifying as is necessary to make sure that we don't leave bits of the network creating problems for the wider network. You know, in my instance, I'm specifically interested in work north of York, but I'm sure everyone else could make a claim for their patch. So it's more about, are we doing enough at this point, feeding into what's being done to assess decisions?
Yeah, Councillor Harker, I'm confident that the work stream that's been set up, which is working very differently to previously, it is taking that whole system approach and looking at, if we get wrong of this infrastructure, what is the service outcome that we can deliver reliably on the interventions being made? And then you ramp up based on the different interventions that could get across the line. We do wholeheartedly need to row in behind the schemes identified in the appendices, and we've flagged North of York within there. But it will come down to choices. If the interventions aren't realised, then you will have service choices. If they are all realised, it's then a case of how do we best use all of the infrastructure that we've got to absolutely drive home the benefits of the investment being made. We're at an early stage. The point that we're at the moment is exploring all of those different service configuration options. There are a sort of inordinate amount. What we're seeing through that work stream is that the industry experts are whittling those down to the realistic ones, and you've got a healthy mix of operators, Network Rail, DFT are in the room, along with ourselves and officer representatives to thrash that out, and we are supporting with that engagement, and we will bring key information to this forum and other forums at the right time to shape that.
Okay, thank you for that, Charlie. So I'm not seeing anybody else indicating. I mean, this is a really important piece of work that we need to make sure progresses and gets prioritised, and that we're aware of going forward. Because if there's any non-investments that get made from this list, it could compromise the billions of pounds of investment that's going across the north, which we obviously want to maximise. Katie?
Thanks, Chair. I did just want to come back on Councillor Harker's point about North of York, because this is a very valid consideration, and it was one of the schemes that we wrote to the Secretary of State and the Rail Minister about after the comprehensive spending review, because without making an intervention there, we're going to have some choices to be made around what's going to be the art of the possible in terms of services. Notwithstanding, we haven't had a reply back on that letter yet. If committee's comfortable, and we have pushed and sort of tried to make progress behind the scenes, but I think it might be timely to consider whether some further advice on this or some further influence might be appropriate. What I'm going to propose is that we see what comes out of this initial analysis over the course of the next 4 or 5 weeks, and then we may come to the committee to see if whether you want to make any further representations to the Secretary of State or the Rail Minister, because I think Councillor Harker's point is spot on, that there are some other critical interventions that this committee's championed, and we don't want to lose those in the mix in amongst dealing with what we know are in the list in the paper in terms of short term, but there are some other critical ones that we know will pause during the comprehensive spending review, and we don't want to lose that momentum behind those. So, Chair, we'll revert with some separate advice on that, because I'm just concerned that we don't lose the thread on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie and Charlie, for that. It does seem quite crucial to this work, actually. So if we can have something to push on with government to say these are the crucial, smaller scale, albeit some of these are quite large investments, really, to make the whole network successful, then we, as the North, we should agree on what those are and be able to push for those nationally. So let's make sure this sounds like the first iteration of that list, but it needs some refinement in terms of priorities. Okay. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for that. Again, noting there, but some action to consider that paper as it develops and to push with government on the investments that are needed to progress it. So going on then to the next item on the agenda, which is rail freight investments, something that this committee has looked at before and is very important that it's raised up in profile, because obviously we talk about GBR a lot, but freight my understanding is freight will be outside GBR, and therefore it's be a very important partner for us going forward to make sure the whole network works. It says here Maggie Simpson, OBE, Director General of the Rail Freight Group, is going to speak and provide a strategic overview in the start of this item. Is that right? Is Maggie there?
I am, Chair. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me along today. I know David's going to come in and talk about the paper that you've had presented to you as part of the meeting pack, but just a few introductory remarks, if I might. So we've really welcomed the support of TfN over the long term on rail freight, some fantastic work that's been done by colleagues supporting the case for rail freight across the north of England. So thank you for that and for that partnership working. Just by way of recap, we know that having effective freight links is absolutely essential for the economic growth of the north of England, whether that's the industrial transformation that we're seeing, new energy sectors building out in and across the region, building new homes and infrastructure, but actually also supporting communities. We are all consumers of rail freight. Every time we switch the lights on or walk down the pavement or indeed go to the supermarket, freight touches absolutely everybody. And as the North grows and its economy grows, we will need more effective rail freight and more effective road freights in general to support each other. Obviously, we know that the north of England has some challenges on its freight links, very dependent on the M62, which I'm sure, as you all know, is very not congested at all. Hardly anyone uses it and never goes wrong. So, if I look at the rail freight offer east, west, west, east across the north of England, it really is the poor neighbour. I talk to a lot of ports. None of them around the coast of the UK believe they've got the right rail links or the right road links, but actually across the north of England, it is much worse than other places. They don't even have the basics of the capability to handle modern shipping containers on that east-west axis. And so we've really welcomed the commitment to including freight within Transpennine route upgrade and the work that is going on in the development of that scheme. I think it's fair to say that freight isn't asking for the moon across that scheme. We're asking for the basics of gauge clearance and an hourly off-peak pass to help rail freight run those services in a resilient and productive way. So why are we here today? Why has David and team put the paper together, and why am I here? I think it's really to ask for your continued support for rail freight in the context of what we've been hearing around in terms of other infrastructure demands, limited funding, and all the challenges that we have. Specifically, I think within TRU, we know the next funding stage gate comes up early next year. Everyone's working really hard to make the freight case for that as strong as it can be. The design work is making really good progress, but we've all seen enough projects go wrong to know that we can't rest on our laurels. We need to make sure that we've got the right support and the right evidence to get those freight elements through into delivery. Secondly, TRU, in terms of that gauge capability, will cover the central section, but actually to get from port to city across the network, there's some off-core gauge schemes which are being developed under the TRU headline, but will need to be specifically funded. We think the total cost of those is less than 25 million. Some of them are being looked at already for very innovative ways of doing it during regular engineering work, for example, but we need to make sure that they don't get dropped or missed so that we've got the end-to-end capability. I didn't see Charlie's list on the last item, but I'm hoping that North Allerton to Eaglescliffe is on there. It was one of the schemes that was stopped during the spending review. We've got local and regional money contributing to that scheme that's now frozen in aspic, and we know that it's causing some challenges with other programmes on the East Coast Main Line, so a particular plea that that one keeps a priority. And I think finally, you know, we know there's a lot of work going on across the north of England looking at different timetable options. We've got Manchester Task Force, we've got North of England Integration Board, we've now got work happening on Northern Powerhouse, and that's fantastic to see. But a real plea that we make sure that the freight spec is aligned in all those programmes. It isn't quite aligned at the moment. Some people are looking at freight in different ways, or not at all actually in those programmes, and we'll only get success for freight if we make sure we've got that aligned approach. And I know that, you know, there are parts of the network where it's really difficult and some really difficult choices, but I think the experience of the East Coast Mainline timetable development is that if we don't get the freight brief right at the beginning, it doesn't miraculously go away. It just hangs around and causes trouble later. So a real plea that we've got that alignment as we take those work packages forward. So David, I think is going to take you through the paper that you've got a bit more specifically now, but I hope that was helpful by way of introduction.
It was. Thank you very much for that, Maggie. And we've been asked to do prepare some statutory advice, Secretary of State on this item, colleagues, just to mention that. I think just a new question, North Allerton to Newcastle, that was it, wasn't it? I think you said.
It's on to Eaglescliffe, yeah. It's called Yarm Tunnel, and it's a gauge clearance scheme that allows you to not, basically at the moment the trains have to reverse at Darlington if they're going north, and it would relieve the need to do that, which is a massive efficiency saving for freight, but a performance benefit for passenger as well.
Okay, Charlie, is it on our list?
It is.
I can, come in there, Chase. It's on the list in this paper as well.
Fine, good, excellent. Right, so carry on then. Got your colleague there to speak.
Yeah, Chair, if I can just draw.
David?
Yeah, I'll just draw out the main points of the paper. Look, and I think we worked really collaboratively on this with Maggie and her regional colleagues, and actually officers right across the north of England, to basically pull out what are the biggest priorities at this moment in time for investment in rail freight. And I think there's absolute kind of consensus across that community that is, as Maggie said, it's getting the most out of that Transpennine route upgrade investment, huge investment going in. You as a committee and Transport for North Board made advice on this previously, get that gauge clearance baked into Transpennine route upgrade. So that is happening, but obviously it can't be fully utilised unless these off-route gauge clearance routes are treated as well. The good news is there's a lot of work going on to develop that, but it's not a done deal yet. And really, that's what this paper is about. At the heart of it, about a third of the overall Transpennine route upgrade benefits are now down to freight. And as I say, to maximise those, it's really important that all those paths can be taken up. And this is a whole new flow we're talking about, east-west. At the moment, it's a very convoluted route to get any sort of container traffic east to west, one that operators really don't use because it's such a difficult route. This will create a route right across the heart, parallel to the M62. And we know, and Maggie's colleague has told us, that the market is there if we can get this right. So the consensus is that the focus needs to be on those additions to the Transpennine route upgrade. The paper sets that out, I think, quite clearly in 5.1. Does include, just to emphasise again, that gauge clearance to Teesport via that scheme that was paused previously. That's an important element. It also refers to the need for more rail freight terminal capacity in the northwest in particular, which is important again if we're going to see the take up of that freight and the transfer from road to rail. So what we're suggesting is that if this committee agrees, it would make a recommendation on statutory advice on those points in the paper. That would then need to go to TfN board because statutory advice comes from the TfN board, but we draft a letter around the points in this paper for the board to consider at their meeting in March. There are two further recommendations in the paper. One's about beyond TRU. Having said that's absolutely the priority, there are some further works that are needed to be developed into a pipeline because we know there's growth planned in all sorts of sectors, aggregates obviously supporting the general economic growth and growth in construction. It's important that we have a pipeline in the north beyond TRU, so to develop that with the industry. And also the conditions need to be right for freight operators. It's not they're not kind of government contracts. These are private sector operators. They can only operate if the conditions are right, if they get the right access, if they get the right pricing incentives to facilitate that transfer to rail. So rail reform, which we've talked about in the past, is a real opportunity to get the balance right in terms of freight and passengers and create those incentives. So we're suggesting that there's some criteria that we've set out in 7.1 and 7.3 in the paper that would provide the outputs that freight is looking for, and that subject to any comments you have, we use those in what we expect is going to be a consultation around these aspects of rail reform in the near future. So again, looking for any views on that. So I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll all be probably happy to draft the statutory advice, I would have thought, for the TfN committee. It is such an important area of work. And I suppose my concern is obviously TRU is ongoing at the moment. And therefore, is there again a prioritisation of this quite long list, actually, of things that should be done earlier, sooner rather than later?
Yeah, and I think the answer to that is we had a much longer list, and we've really sort of honed it down to these TRU related gauge clearances, and it's quite difficult to then sort of prioritize within that because these are all really needed. These all relate to flows that the industry is telling us are capable of moving to rail. The good news is work is underway on all of those, and as Maggie said, it's not a huge amount of money, 25-30 million on a scale of 11 billion that's being invested in TRU. So given, again, how Maggie said the North is so far lagging behind in these gauge cleared east-west freight facilities, I think we're proposing that the statutory advice basically asks for all of that in the first instance.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent value for money, I think, is what you're trying to tell us. So any questions on any of this? Councillor Mannion?
I'm fortunate and I've got two current goods train drivers as members of my group on the council at Cheshire East, so I get plenty of advice on freight. One of the challenges we've got is Crewe is the busiest freight hub in the country now we're not moving coal around. It's also the gateway to North Wales from the northwest and beyond the Republic of Ireland. And what we really need is a freight strategy for the north that can coordinate investment coming in. I'll just give you an example. The West Coast Main Line will be full south of Crewe within the next couple of years, Arup have told us, and they told us that 18 months ago, and not a lot seems to have happened. It's a mixed freight line, so whilst we might be really good at improving freight flows across the region, down to the Midlands and to the southeast, there are they call them paths. The paths are starting to run out. The government's good, they've providing some financial incentive for new freight paths to be started up, but the challenge we've got is getting in and out of our region, and also the connectivity with the other regions. So what I'm saying is, I don't disagree with a single word of what we've discussed this morning, but what we do need is a freight strategy for the north, which also addresses what I call the connectivity issues into and out of our region, which are a drag or a deterrent. And so again, there's two examples there: the need to improve access into North Wales and to the Republic of Ireland using rail, and also the fact the capacity issues south of Crewe on the West Coast Main Line from the northwest. I appreciate we've got the East Coast Main Line as well, but that's a real challenge because there has been growth in the number of freight paths being taken up, and there are very few remaining available at the moment. So just thought I'd share that with you, but I do support the suggested, but I think it's part of the bigger piece of work, and one where we need to try and get ahead of the curve. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, Councillor Mannion. Did you want to come back on that, David, in the first instance?
Yeah, I think I see Julian's got his hand up, and he may want to come in on the specifics around the West Coast Main Line. But yeah, we have done a lot of work with the industry on an overall freight strategy, and Councillor Mannion's absolutely right. These are all kind of blockages, and we've done some work identifying this right across the north. I think there's always a danger in sort of saying the top priority is the Transpennine ones, that you then miss others. I think in part this was the reason for suggesting a further action to you in terms of that medium-term pipeline. And we certainly recognise the constraints around West Coast and Crewe in particular, and that's the sort of thing we'd want to work up in more detail. But maybe if Julian wants to come in now on the specifics on the West Coast.
Okay, Julian.
Yes, thanks, Chair, and absolutely, David. I'm not commenting on the national strategy, but maybe some elements on the West Coast Main Line, because I agree with your concerns about capacity and freight growth, and it is absolutely one priority to ensure that we are able to sustain more growth for freight. So we're working on plans now to optimize the timetable to try and see how we can make more space for freight. You will be aware that one of our issues is with power supply, because not only do we want more freight, but we also want greener freight. And I think freight operators are on the journey to electrification of their fleet, which is really positive. But that means that for us on the West Coast Main Line, this is actually the limiting factor now, is providing enough power, in particular just north of Crewe, to accommodate that growth and that electrification. So this is all part of a strategy, I'd say, for the West Coast Main Line, which we're building to try and accommodate more traffic, rail traffic in general, and freight specifically. But I would be happy if you want to have like a separate conversation to give more details if that's needed.
Thank you very much for that, Julien. And yeah, I think so I'm not seeing anybody dissenting from the actions that we're suggesting in this paper. It is a very important work, and I think perhaps we all need to be cited of it when in our own combined authorities and authorities when talking to government about our asks of rail investment. It does sound like something that is absolutely essential, and if nobody's pushing it, then it won't get over the line, will it? So let's make sure we incorporate it in our asks of government regionally as well. So I'm not seeing any dissenting from the recommendations there. Obviously, this next goes to Transport for the North for them to issue the statutory guidance. David, how do we draft that, and what are the approvals processes? Do we see a draft, or does that go to drafting under the TFN committee?
Yeah, I think if the committee's happy, we'll proceed to a draft. We'll work with officers through exec board to review that before it goes to TFN board, and then TFN board will get the chance to to see that draft, we'd attach a draft set of guidance to the board paper for you to have a look at. But we'll work with your officers as we have done throughout to keep everybody informed.
Thank you. Lovely, thank you very much. I'm not seeing any dissenting voices from that, so I take that as tacit approval to the actions in that item. Thank you very much. So moving on then to item number 8, Rail North financial contributions. This is a pretty straightforward item really, which sounds to have been subject to negotiations between our respective officers and Rail North. Katie, did you want to say something briefly on this? I'm not sure I'm going to have many people asking questions on it.
I'll take the paper as read. It's the routine update that we do. These are arrangements that relate to the Rail North Partnership Agreement and the accompanying franchise agreements. So no, we're looking for the committee's support today for the proposed allocations in the paper, the contributions for the year ahead, and then they will go forward to the TFN board as is normal procedure. And I think the point to note is that we have looked in the spirit of kind of budgetary pressures elsewhere to reduce those as far as possible this year, while maintaining the core services through the Rail North Partnership Executive. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Is anybody wanting to comment on this, or are we happy to give it approval? No comments. In that case, we'll take that as an approval. Katie, thank you very much. There's another item which we need to exclude press and public from. So if I could just ask you to bear with us for a moment after the end of this meeting to do that item. But the last item on the public agenda is item number 9, date and time of next meeting, which is the 9th of June at 11 AM in Manchester. So if we're all happy with that. Yeah, lovely. So thank you very much. So then I'll move to the resolution to exclude the press and public. Item number 10, to resolve that the press and public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of item number 11 on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as set out in paragraph 3 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. So can we just, can you confirm when we've come off webcasting, please? Thank you.